Have you seen those signs at establishments that say, "Smile, you're on camera"? I've always found those to be quite creepy and a not so subtle reminder that we're all being watched all day, every day. And what should be a gentle, friendly message takes on a whole new meaning. At the airport, in a metro station, at a traffic light, in a cafe, at the office, in schools, at supermarkets, and even in our homes, CCTV is omnipresent. One almost can't believe a life without it today. Watched, monitored, surveilled, you can call it what you want, but there's always someone watching, as Black Mirror-like as that sounds. But it seems like having Big Brother watching doesn't seem to give authorities sleepless nights as much as the thought of the CCP or the Chinese Communist Party snooping does. With the recent coordinated pager explosions in Lebanon, the Indian government is looking to immediately operationalize its order that will likely weed out Chinese vendors from the supply chains of all forms of surveillance equipment. While the Gazette notification came out in March and April this year, ET had reported last week that the government accelerated its implementation and sharpened its focus on security after the Lebanon explosions. The government will now allow players from quote-unquote trusted locations to sell in India. Of the two separate Gazette notifications that came out in March and April, one revolved around Make in India guidelines for surveillance cameras, and another was on the criteria for CCTV certification. The orders from the government laid the foundation for changes in procurement of surveillance systems in India and placed a strong focus on promoting Make in India products in the surveillance market. This is because, as per estimates, nearly 60% of the CCTV market in India is dominated by three players: the Indian companies CP Plus and Chinese players like Hikvision and Dahua. But why this focus on surveillance equipment? What are the threats that are associated with Chinese surveillance equipment? What qualifies as a trusted location? Which are the players that stand to benefit? Who will lose out? How much cheaper are they in comparison to their European counterparts? How have other countries dealt with security and data leakage threats associated with Chinese equipment? Is it realistic to remove Chinese influence from the surveillance supply chain when so many components are from there? Data leakage threats. You have reason to smile now, not because you're being watched, but because we've got the best set of guests to break all of this down. An analyst who tracks the space closely and a surveillance researcher. It's Friday, October 4th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to India's CCTV Crackdown, only on the Morning Brief from the Economic Times. As per Britannica, closed-circuit television or CCTV is widely considered to have first been developed by 1927 Russian inventor Leon Teremin. I hope I'm saying his name right. This CCTV system consisted of a camera and a shortwave radio and was used to watch visitors at the Kremlin in Moscow. Another notable system was created by German engineer Walter Bruch, and I really hope I'm saying his name right too, but his system debuted in 1942 during World War II and was used by Germany's military to monitor rocket launches. However, this system too, as with the one devised by Teremin, was unable to record information, thereby requiring someone to monitor the live feed. But by the end of the decade, CCTV systems were being sold in the United States, and in 1953, British officials reportedly used surveillance systems for the coronation of Elizabeth II. The usage of CCTV continued to expand, especially after VCRs became widely available in the 1970s, which also allowed for storage of data. During the following decade, Video surveillance systems were increasingly marketed to banks, stores, and other businesses vulnerable to theft. In addition, police departments began relying on footage as a critical source of evidence. By the 1990s, digital systems were widely available, and their ability to take in more footage in a far more compact format allowed them to rapidly eclipse analog technology. Cameras then began to appear in ATMs and crowded areas such as sporting venues and train stations. The September 11 attacks on the World Trade Center led to a dramatic increase in government-operated CCTV in public spaces. Governments around the world justified public surveillance as a necessity for the safety of everyone. And from then till now, we know just how pervasive and prevalent CCTV technology really is. But this is the history of what has brought us to this point. We are here now to give you the current Indian scenario, and for that, we turn to Varun Gupta of Counterpoint Research to tell us exactly what these government orders that came out earlier this year really say, why they're important, and how they will impact the industry, while also giving us a panoramic view of the surveillance landscape in India. Listen in. But Varun, what were these orders that came out in March and April all about? Could you summarize that for our listeners, please?
So yeah, there are two notifications that were launched by the government earlier this year. So the first notification talks about the localization content in these surveillance cameras. It also highlights that the percentage of localization should be around 25% for this financial year, and it will be increasing by 10% each year for the next 2 years. And it also talks about that the bare PCB shall be assembled in India using the SMT lines in India. So it is inherently focused on improving the localization content on these surveillance cameras, as well as improving the local vendor ecosystem in this domain. Then the second notification talks about the stringent checks and certifications required by these surveillance camera manufacturers, such as going through the BIS testing, as well as an STQC certification that will be testing out the hardware and the software very strictly. And it has also mandated the use of a secure element in these cameras, which will enable more security into these systems, as well as a mandate of using the software level security measures such as anti-malware software and anti-tamper-proof softwares, which make these softwares more secure.
Varun, one thing that you had mentioned when we spoke was the security aspect, that a lot of these guidelines are being put in place to tackle the security aspect, right? Can you elaborate a little bit about why CCTV equipment is being so closely tied to security, and why this is important for the government right now?
So this government mandated these notifications earlier on a suspicion that someone is trying to, have the video footage being tampered with or being monitored from outside the country. So this is very important. It becomes a question of national security over here. And we have also seen government in the US also taking a very stricter or a stringent take on the surveillance systems being used in the country. So the security aspect becomes very crucial in terms of the government mandating it. And the government is not only mandating it for its own use, it's also mandating it for the larger enterprises and the larger business players who are the key customers for these markets. So it is not just for just the government buildings, it is also for the public infrastructure, and it is also for the private infrastructure as well.
So basically anyone who wants to sell in India, right? And also it seems like these guidelines will severely impact Chinese players. So could you possibly help us understand what this impact will be on Chinese CCTV providers?
So these guidelines are definitely going to impact all the players which are there into the market. All of them have to invest into a manufacturing facility, an assembly facility, and even a testing facility to test out all their new equipments. And more or less, of course, it is more going to challenge the players which are solely dependent on the Chinese supply chain for their components. But in the near term, it is going to affect all of the players in India, because they will have to increase and also conform to the requirements mandated by the government in terms of aligning to the BOM cost, conformity, which is 25% for now in this financial year after this notification gets live. But again, if we talk about who is going to benefit from here, I believe that the Indian players are the ones which are going to be benefited the most. And if you look at the market, CP Plus, the largest player in the market, they have already started working onto it. They have started to invest a lot into the R&D in their company. And they're also tying up with L&T Semi to produce Indian IPs for surveillance SOCs, which is a good step because design is the first key step to be taken before we proceed further into getting all the components on board or getting the components manufactured here in India.
Chinese CCTV products are much cheaper than European counterparts like Bosch, right? So I wanted to ask whether you see people willing to pay a premium price for a surveillance product just because they feel it might have better security.
So if you look at the price delta right now between a lower end product, which is mostly by a Hikvision, CP Plus or Dahua, and compare it to a very premium end product from Bosch, the price differential will be 10x as of now. But if you look at the market, we have to actually get into the market and look what various price points are there for various applications. So for a SMB product, the market is a low premium category. Then for more enterprise use and smart cities use, it's mid-end. And we see that players like Honeywell, Panasonic, Siemens, they play into this area of market. And then comes the premium end of the market, which we see are very critical applications. So where we see that Bosch is playing the biggest role over there, be it government, airports, smart city infrastructures, and all those things, we see that Bosch has a monopoly over there. But once these guidelines kick in, it will also force these companies to rethink their pricing strategy. And we may also see some players, entering new price categories as well. So for example, Bosch could actually start to look at the mid end of the, pricing category, and they may also launch products similar to that to cater to that part of the market.
How realistic is it to really remove the Chinese influence from, say, the CCTV and surveillance market? Because it's not just the apparatus that you install, right? The critical part is the recorder and the chipset, right? So these are, from my understanding at least, primarily done by Chinese suppliers as of now in India. So how are we going to navigate that?
It's an interesting point, dear. And I think that over here, we have to look at the price differential is going to actually minimize in a bit in the near term, because the players which are solely dependent on Chinese products will have to actually look out for different product supply chains based out of Taiwan and Korea, which are right now not similarly priced due to the scale that at what the Chinese components are available for. But yes, going into the future down the line in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see that a similar scale we'll be able to achieve. And now with, the Indian players trying to also invest a lot into the Indian IP of, SOCs and other components that are required for the camera system. So we'll see that in next 2 to 3 years, this pricing will come down similar to what the Chinese players are offering as of now.
When we talk of this whole semiconductor aspiration that India has, right? We're talking about a large fab coming up in Gujarat, several OSAT facilities coming up, right? How important is it for this use case, that is the surveillance use case for chips, to be explored further when we look at, building that fabrication play?
It is again a very interesting point. If you look at the market right now, India is still very penetrated in terms of the surveillance systems penetration. And India is going to be the biggest market for surveillance products in the next 3 years. The demand is going to be 2x or 3x. And the other markets, if you look at the global counterparts, they have started to show signs of saturation. And even in China also, they did a lot of installations during the COVID period. And now the installations are or have become stagnant. So India is the key market, and also India can also explore the export market. For example, CP Plus is already exporting to 10 different countries outside of India as well currently. So India has huge potential for that as an export location. And we can expect that these efforts which are going into developing Indian IPs for SOCs and other critical components combined with what the other efforts are being made to get the semiconductor ecosystem to India in terms of fab manufacturing as well as the OSAT packaging. So surveillance is one key market which is already on a growth path, and it's going to grow more and more in the future. So we do have a very good potential if we combine surveillance with our efforts in the semiconductor ecosystem.
But it isn't just India that is concerned about Chinese CCTV equipment. In November 2022, the United States government, through the FCC or the Federal Communications Commission, banned the sale of equipment from Hikvision and Dahua due to, and I quote, unacceptable risks to national security. The FCC declared the companies a threat to national security after concerns that their equipment could be used by China to spy on the US. What followed was a chain reaction in other countries, including the UK and in Australia. And to shed some light on why all of this is happening across the globe, we have with us Dr. Ausma Berno, who is a lecturer in tech and crime at the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Australia's Griffith University. I wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about what you are seeing in terms of trends globally, right, with Chinese surveillance equipment.
Specifically talking to Chinese surveillance technologies, look, I won't go too far into the history, but if I can squeeze a couple of sentences on how China has come to the place where it is now, I would say that China started developing quite rapidly in the 1980s and the 1990s. At that time, after the opening up, the reforms of so-called opening up, China accepted imported technologies, including computer-based technologies and any innovative technologies. And a lot of them were imported from North America. A lot of them were imported from Europe. Now, at that time, there was a big sense of China needing to catch up. And government actually, slowly as they built capacity, as they started making money in trade, as the economy grew, they started actually being quite aggressive, and not only in the domestic Chinese market, but also internationally. And this is when the boat started rocking. So what was China doing at the time? China was actually in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Chinese government started giving really big subsidies to Chinese technology companies to encourage those local tech industries to develop and modernize not only the country, but also start exporting items. So this is where we started seeing the first conflicts of technology and competition, not only within China, but also geopolitically, as the Chinese players started exporting them into different countries. And actually at that time, we knew that even North American companies that were present in China, they had been accused and found to have engaged in espionage within China, but they were never really trialed for that, or nothing like that ever happened. So when Chinese technologies came into the market, they were moderately priced, and that was the big selling point. That's how they're able to export so many different kinds of technologies, not just security technologies. I'm pretty sure my mic that I'm speaking on is made in China. And also the mic boom that I'm speaking through is made in China. Now, when it comes to technologies that have to do with security, that can be a problem.
But, you've spoken about the history of it, but I'd like you to touch upon what these concerns really are, right? You said in your last line that, this could be a problem. What exactly is the problem? Why is it that everyone is suddenly woken up to this whole aspect of China probably snooping or having the capability to snoop if they would like?
Look, overall, we've seen big concerns in the past 3-4 years that a lot of them started with Chinese CCTV cameras. There had been previous concerns with 5G, which referred to critical infrastructure. So fears that if 5G is somehow disconnected and China is not an allied country, the countries that have that 5G infrastructure will be left outside without internet. These concerns that we're now seeing with CCTV technologies are slightly different. These are concerns that relate to Internet of Things devices or IoT devices. So to answer your question directly, first, some of these concerns are technical, right? However, there is a bit more to that than the technical concerns only. If we only had technical concerns, we would make better standards. We would ensure that manufacturers are forced to adhere to those standards, and we would monitor that adherence. When it comes to Chinese technologies, the concerns have brought up. So this is where we start seeing that the technical cybersecurity concerns are mixed with geopolitics.
Can you give our listeners an idea of why Hikvision and Dahua specifically keep coming up in different countries? And what are these countries really doing with these two companies?
When in March 2021, the US Federal Communications Commission, when they included two largest companies, Hikvision and Dahua, in the covered list, they were also saying that these could be companies of national security threat because it's possible that they're linked with the government in some capacity, right? The Chinese government. And this is not uncommon for Chinese companies more broadly because, simply put, the Chinese Ministry of Public Security is one of the largest buyers of security tech. So for Hikvision and Dahua, this is a sales opportunity. And like any company that's wanting to make money from the tech, they're going to sell to the entity that's buying most, that's buying the biggest quantity, or maybe giving the best price. These China-made surveillance cameras have been banned from installation in federal buildings in the United States. Actually, it started from there. And from there, because of the Five Eyes Alliance, there's strong connections between United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. So we saw that domino across those 5 countries as well. So United States, United Kingdom, and Australia now ban explicitly or implicitly CCTV cameras that are made in China.
Right. And that brings me to my other question. Who do you see as the biggest beneficiaries of this crackdown on Chinese companies? As someone who researches this sector very, very technically and specifically, who are going to be the beneficiaries? Would it be European players like Bosch, or are there other people in the mix as well?
Yeah, I wonder what's going to happen with all of this stuff going on, because when the biggest players in the market get banned or they lose market share due to certain reasons, right? Other players get an opportunity to enter that market. And that's going to be dependent on the country. So in Australia, we can see Avigilon taking over that high-stake national security surveillance and security market. Avigilon is still not going to be appealing to everyday consumers. They're still going to continue buying Chinese CCTV surveillance cameras, maybe being a bit more careful, maybe changing passwords, maybe not pointing those cameras to like their toilet or their baby crib, etc. In India, I would like to make a guess that maybe India is going to use this as an opportunity to promote local suppliers of security cameras and allow those companies to install security cameras. When it comes to consumers, look, there have to be standards that protect consumers. We're busy in our everyday lives. We're not going to go to our local electronics store and stand there for 3 hours trying to understand and ChatGPT like what it means, the technical specifications of these cameras. So we still don't have those standards. The products are still going to be coming into most of the countries. And in the consumer market, they're still going to be there, and they're going to be the most prevalent products.
Sure. But we've spoken about the concerns that come with Chinese players, right? Or the concerns that different governments have. As a researcher, I want you to sort of weigh in on whether you see these concerns as valid concerns, or if you feel they're exaggerated and maybe slightly unfounded.
So this is exactly what I research, right? The very core of my research is, why are we so worried about Chinese tech? And one thing is, I think in a lot of countries, there's slightly racist overtones that make it also convenient for political campaigns to say, hey, this is Chinese asbestos and we don't want it here in our country. So in 2021, independent research has found that there were around 60,000 surveillance cameras in Australia from Hikvision and Dahua. There were 41K from Hikvision and 18K from Dahua. So Australia has removed around 1,000 of these cameras, right? Which means that there's still probably 100K of China-made surveillance cameras that are still there in the market. So has it really made a big impact or just a big political splash? I don't know. And in my work, I argue that first, sure, if there's national security concerns about anything, we should be relying on really high quality suppliers. But also, I wonder if that time, that political time, would be better spent to ensure that IoT technologies altogether have better standards. They're monitoring, penalties for non-compliance, and spend that time and money there on those priorities, so that we have less issues with stalking, less issues with hacking, which are now on the rise as well. Less issues with, just monitoring, using those surveillance systems for bad reasons.
When I wrote my story last week, I had heard from people that the government has already begun rejecting Chinese CCTV equipment tenders and has been preferring European players like Bosch instead. Just for context, Bosch is around 7 to 10 times more expensive than its Chinese counterparts. India was the first to ban TikTok, citing national security threats. The US has been trying similarly to ban the wildly popular social media app. But whether a blanket ban is the way to go for CCTVs is a question best answered by the authorities themselves. But with their orders on surveillance equipment set to come into effect this month, it does seem like the big boys of the surveillance market like Hikvision and Dahua must be hoping they don't lose out on another big market. But as they say, one man's loss is another man's gain. This could turn out to be a golden opportunity for Indian players to step up to provide a more secure, safe, and competitively priced alternative that can not only be used domestically but can also be used overseas. With a growing geopolitical tension and China finding itself in the eye of the storm, India is in a unique position. The lens is focused on us, I'd say. Thank you, Varun and Ausma. It's Friday, October 4th. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you were listening to India's CCTV Crackdown only on the morning brief from the Economic Times. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi and sound designed by Amrit Reddy. Executive producers Anirban Chaudhary and Arijit Burman. A new episode of the Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday on a listening platform of your choice. Also, we're dropping an out-of-scare episode on Saturday just for you. Tune in for the latest from our Polls on My Pod series, where Nidhi Sharma and Jatin Thakkar analyze the Haryana Assembly elections. You definitely don't want to miss it. Thank you and have a great weekend.